Great, great. Okay, well, thanks everybody. I'm glad we could all kind of get together. It's a little bit different feel than what we normally do over at the restaurants, and definitely is we've been pivoting a lot in this business. I think Tim and but Rob, you both agree is kind of interesting time frame. So what I wanted to, I'm kind of helping people get on. I know that you have to use Chrome to get onto this. It won't go. I'm old and I like using Explorer, so didn't let me on at first. But if you use Chrome, it'll definitely work on the StreamYard. So I'll work to get and Firefox as well too. Yes, absolutely. So I also want to let you know, Tim, thank you for jumping in and helping us out. Dwayne Stevens actually had a situation with his wife he had to take care of, but I did get to ask him a bunch of questions. And to give you an idea, the reason why we wanted to talk to Dwayne, and we'll bring him on at another time too, is he is actually an economist. He has a PhD in economy, which is amazing to me. And he is an investor. Came in the 80s in LA flipping houses and has pivoted into buy and hold properties. And at this point, his goal is 350 of them, which is more than what I expected. And right now he's standing a little over 200 properties. So he's on his way to getting there. So some of the things that I talked to him about on the thing I'll bring up throughout the conversation, but he couldn't be with us. So thanks, Tim. Thanks for jumping in. And I know you're an expert on this category as well. So Rob, I know a lot of people know Tim in our group, but they don't know you necessarily so well. Could you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, guys. Audio okay? Everybody can. Okay, so everybody. Okay, great. So my name is Rob Chevez. I'm the CEO of the Casa Group. I am the founder of Grid Investor Network, the Grid Investor Network. I love real estate. I'm passionate about it. I've been buying it for the last 20 years. Bought my first little house hack in 1999. And then my wife and I have been off to the races ever since, just buying real estate. I got my license and started building a team in really started building the team, I think, in 2009, 2010, because I learned that you needed this 30, 60, 90-day cash flow in the business. You can create it a couple different ways, either through having a construction arm, an agent arm, a development arm, hard money. That's all earned income. But really, we're buying hold people. So my wife and I, we'll buy a property, and we'll hold as much as we possibly can. So I'm honored to be with you guys. I feel like this is my world. I love talking about this. I love talking shop. I love talking to other real estate entrepreneurs and just masterminding and brainstorming. We're all on the same path together, right? Some people are further ahead than others, and so it's everybody's responsibility to kind of pull each other up, right? That little chain. So I'm glad to be here and offer any, guidance that I possibly can. And I'm here to learn. So sure. Thanks, guys.
That's great. I appreciate that. And one of the questions I was going to ask is how did you start in this business in the buy and hold side, or did you jump in at a different avenue? Like we started as flip investors. So you really started as a buy and hold investor.
Buy and hold. I late night infomercial, Carlton Sheets. That's what got me started. Carlton Sheets, late night. Tiny classify. I was like, what? But that got my mind thinking about real estate. And then I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I'm sure a lot of people here have read that as well. And I started attending different RIAs. But, I was really an accidental, not an accidental landlord. What happened was I was a recent college grad. I took this personal finance class in college, which was just an elective. It was the best class that I could have ever taken because in my house, we never talked about money. We didn't really talk about finances. And so I was done with all my core classes. I had a whole semester of just like all electives. I took like scuba diving, this personal finance class. And in that personal finance class, I wish I knew the guy's name. He was a financial planner. But he said, if you plan on being anywhere longer than 2 to 3 years, you should consider buying a home. And that resonated with me. I had been traveling the world with, I was a Foreign Service brat, and I wanted roots. And I was, okay, I'm going to go buy a house. But I didn't want to pay for the house all myself. And I was used to that whole having roommates because I was in college. So I ended up, scraping a little bit of money together and buying a townhouse in Maryfield for $136,000. And then I put, my friends in the rooms, and they paid me rent. And I was like, wait a second. I own this house and they're paying the majority of my mortgage. And this is awesome. Like, I should just rinse and repeat this. And that's how it started, right?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. It's I'm glad you didn't go into the scuba diving world, because it would have been a whole different dynamic for you.
A whole different dynamic.
So Tim, tell me how you got into this.
Oh, wow. Okay. I bought my first house. Now, I'm really old compared to you guys, man. 1984, when interest rates were 18%. And same thing, bought my first house and rented out the 2 bedrooms. My wife and I, my girlfriend at the time, we moved into the attic, and my roommates paid my mortgage, and it was wonderful. I was making very little money, let them make the payments. The neighbor next door was elderly. She fell down, she broke her hip. The neighbor next door and the kids came over and said, hey, mom and dad, we're going to sell the house. Are you interested? I bought that house. Then the house on the other side of me, same thing. It was elderly, and we were going to rename the street. I always joked about that. Bought that house, and then I bought a farm in Nanjemoy. And then after I lived in Nanjemoy, I realized, hey, I need commercial. So we sold the farm to 1031, built a 20,000 square foot building. It just kept accumulating. I mean, it's like it's fun. It's a game.
It's a game.
And it's nice to know that you're building wealth and somebody else is doing it for you.
Right.
So. And it's not that hard. It really isn't. And now that I'm in the business, it's been 35 years. I love helping other people achieve the same aspect, because let's face it, we as Americans do not save. We have no savings. Mm-hmm. 401k gone, right? It's the last couple of months. My 401k is a 201k, so I got to rebuild again, right? So I'm looking at everything and I'm saying to myself, you know what? Real estate really is the long term. They're not making any more dirt. And if that's the case, and you can acquire, and honestly, the entryway into buying a house with no money down or very little money down, or taking a little bit of leverage on another house to buy another house, it's amazing how you can spend as little as a couple $1,000s and get a $300,000 investment. And what an amazing way to start out. But everybody's afraid. So how did I get in the business? Honestly, I just enjoy what I do, and now I'm just giving back and just having a hell of a lot of fun along the way.
No, that's awesome. It's interesting. You guys swooped right into the buy and holds. I guess I wasn't smart enough to do that. I went into, like, we accidentally had a couple of rental properties, but it just kind of happened that way. We were looking to Melanie had moved in with me before we were married, and I had a house, and so she moved in with me, and then we took that house, and we were going to sell it when we were kind of getting more space. And in that situation, the lender that we were working with at that point said, hey, why don't you just rent the property out? And we were like, you can do that? Yeah. And that's how we started on that end. And we kind of accidentally kind of fell into landlords. And then when we got into this business really full-fledged, when we were starting to flip houses, and what I wanted to do that was my goal, was flip houses. I didn't really care about anything else. And I learned pretty quickly within the first year to 2 years that we needed to pivot, and we needed to, obviously, flipping houses is a job. Like you said, Rob, it's you're there, you're working. And what I saw was people that were doing the buy and holds, and really that passive income that it was generating, on a couple different levels, was adding to just the 2 that we had were adding to our portfolio just really quickly. And we did minimal work compared to managing flips. So that's kind of how we started as well. So that's really interesting. I guess go ahead.
What happens is that it's a forced piggy bank.
Yep.
People don't realize that. And we, all of us, saving is a difficult thing to do. It just is, right? Like it goes into our bank account. We find a reason to spend it, whether it's on our children or on that new toy or something. And what I found was that buying houses with my wife created the discipline of just like, okay, the money's locked there. And now over time, the tenant is paying that off. And I just see them as, each one is its own individual business that has its own individual piggy bank in it. Right.
Right.
And once I understood that concept, I was like, oh, okay, well, I need to do more of that. Right. And less of the earned income stuff. The earned income straight is great, but it's and what people need to understand, actually, here's a big fallacy. And I know that I don't know what topic you guys are covering tonight, but we're on this right now, so I'll mention it. When I first got in the business, I was like, oh, I want to build a passive cash flow, and like I want to have this passive dollars come into my bank account.
Right.
But what they don't tell you on the residential side is that those dollars just get reinvested back into that asset,
over and over,
right? Over and over. And so really what's happening is that they just get reinvested into the asset. You're building up equity and net worth. And it's not until that debt's paid for, right, that you're really going to start seeing cash flow out of that asset, unless you do what you and Mel did with the Airbnbs, right? But then, we all know that there's a certain level of risk now associated with that model that you have to kind of prepare for. And I had this one very wealthy gentleman one time. He owns a lot of commercial. And he said something to me at the time, and I didn't quite understand it. He said, you guys on the residential side, what did he say? He said something like, you guys on the residential side, you're trying to build cash flow, and wealth, but it's really slow. You're not really doing it, right? On the commercial side, we're able to really do it. And I didn't understand at the time. Now I understand what he means, right? You've got triple net leases that are out there. A lot of them they take their equity out of the property after a certain amount of time because now rents have gone up. But on the residential side, unless it's large multifamily, right, a lot of those dollars are getting reinvested into those assets, right? And even with some of the large multifamily, right, they do as well. So I don't know if you want to have a discussion around that. Tim, what kind of properties do you own now?
Commercial and residential. So I've got a blend, commercial, residential, and I've got a farm as well.
Okay.
So all three.
And what's interesting is now commercial, we see gaps in that business, right?
Big time. Yep.
Yeah. And the interesting conversation would be if you had somebody that was doing, let's say storage units versus somebody that was doing office space versus somebody that was doing retail, right? Be an interesting conversation for you guys to have to see, who loves their asset right now.
Right.
Yeah.
That's definitely. It's interesting. We this meeting really we're talking about the residential rental side because or single family, I guess is the best way to say it. Because this meeting actually was slated to be on vacation rentals, and we kind of pivoted from that as we've kind of adjusted our vacation rentals as well.
Right.
And I know Tim, we were just talking earlier today about it was just being able to change what you're doing and still make it work for you is a really big asset.
So I want to say something. I know that I was going to, there's so much feedback.
Yeah, I think it's your mic, Mel. I've been hearing it. And I think it's yours.
I've been muted.
Oh,
Do
now
you
you're
hear it
good.
now? Okay. So I was going to stay silent, but that's hard for me. So just facts. So the interesting thing is we were going to talk about vacation rentals. And reality of it is that there is a need for short-term rentals out there. We've rented every single house that we had short-term. Every one. Now, it may not be for a weekend. It may be for 3 weeks. It may be for 6 months. It may be for month to month. But every single one has been filled, and I keep getting phone calls for more. So I'm going to mute because I got feedback. Thanks.
Yeah, and just following up with that, I don't have feedback, do I?
No.
No. Okay. Melanie was really instrumental in figuring out how to make them work. And what it did was it made us go out and really see how we could market them more and differently. So we went out and we talked to traveling nurses. We talked to just different, we talked to insurance companies. We put it out there on the MLS. We did all these different things. And what we found was there was a need for it. And the other part too is what the virus took away, it brought back as well, was we found a ton of people who wanted to get away from the cities, right, to be somewhere safe. And they were willing to pay for it. They wanted to get out of New York City because they lived in a condo or apartment complex, and they just wanted to get out of the area. So it was really eye opening and just different ideas. We've seen a bunch of different things where I've read a couple articles. Wall Street Journal just had one out that said everybody's scrambling in the short-term rental business. And I think if you can adapt your business to make it work, then it definitely it'll work. It definitely will work. So, but with this, so I thought with one of the things that I wanted to bring up with the single family rentals, the yearly rentals, was really what you guys are seeing in your business. I guess, Tim, you have several, because I guess the two questions people are asking me is, are people paying their rent? Do you expect them to pay their rent? And are people still buying in that sense?
Well, let's answer the buying part. It's tremendous. With the interest rates as low as they are, with the programs that are out there, the government recognizes, and this is the crazy part, that, real estate represents 40% of the total gross revenue. So they're looking at it from homes being built. They're looking at it from, construction to refinance to repurchase to enhancements to flips, et cetera. So the government's pouring a lot of money in to keep interest rates low, number one. And then more importantly, number two, the programs that are available are still pretty amazing. They really are. And so we're still getting 100% financing. We're still getting people going in. We're still doing quite a bit of purchase volume. So last month, for example, the month of April was our top production we've ever done in the company. And it was about 70% purchase, 30% refi. A lot of other companies you'll talk to, it's probably the opposite, if you will. But the purchase volume is just blowing things out of the water, number one. Now, number two, I will tell you, though, on the tenant side and on the landlord side, we are starting to getting a lot of feedback of tenants not making their payments. Forbearance on mortgages right now runs about 6% of the total real estate community. That's a problem because it does affect interest rates, affects programs, primarily the govies, if you will. As far as the landlords, we're finding about one out of every 4 or 5. But the ones that are forbearing are depends upon the class of the rental. So let's talk about that, right? So, you have different levels, different stratums, if you will, of rental. And so you've got the lower end, which might be your Section 8. Well, they're still paying, right? The government's going to pay regardless. So that's actually a very strong sector to be in right now, because normally your Section 8 tenant's paying $50, $60. There's no real reason to forbear, if you will, right? But it's that next group right above that are having the financial difficulties, because people they are struggling. I mean, people in the restaurant business, people in any kind of service industry, whether it be cosmetology, nail salons, movie theater owners, restaurant owners, that's that segment that is having some challenges. Now, above that, honestly, people are paying the rents. People recognize, they're still out there, they're still working. There's no reason not to pay. Now, I was telling Shad earlier, out of all my commercial tenants, I've got one that's not paying, but it's not because they can't pay. It's because they just want to be able to park their money for later. And you know what? The government says we can do that. What am I going to say? Boot my tenant out in the middle of this craziness going on. We're going to park it at the back end, if you will. We're just going to extend it out. It is what it is. But you've got to be a savvy investor. Now, on the other side of the coin, I will tell you from a lending standpoint, they are requiring us to have, more reserves for investment properties, maybe tighter ratios, higher credit scores. So things have tightened up a little bit, but purchase volume is through the roof. And you guys know that. I mean, Melanie, last night you called me. What time did you call me last night? 9:30, 10 o'clock?
Yeah.
I'm calling you from California, writing a contract on a house you've never seen. And we wrote a contract. We did, you did You did a contract. I did a pre-approval letter. We ran the numbers. Bang. This morning you're already presenting an offer. I mean, that's the market we're in. It is that amazing, and it's moving that fast. It really is. So it's wild just to watch. So market is hot, and interest rates surprisingly will remain low for the next year. And the reason for that is because the government are the ones actually buying the mortgage-backed securities. They're the ones actually stimulating the marketplace because they recognize the contribution real estate makes.
Right.
Yeah.
Rob, what are you seeing?
It was interesting when all this happened. I was like, oh, this is bad. This is bad, right? And I look at our numbers. We had a bad March, but that had nothing to do with COVID. You want to know what it had everything to do? We had a bad March, and it was because our buyers agents were losing out on all the multiple offers that were occurring.
Yeah.
And we didn't go in with a lot of listings in February. And if you control the inventory in February, then it translated to a great March. And what happened was a lot of our listings hit in March, which meant that our April was really strong, as strong as it normally is.
Right.
And May and June looks good too. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But March was bad for us. So during this whole thing, I'm like, okay, this is going to be really bad. And yet our numbers are on pace with where they were last year. And if it hadn't been for that March, which I don't attribute COVID to it, we'd be ahead. Right. So we're blessed. One, I think that we're in a strong market here in the DC metro area because there's so much government, support that's here.
Right.
I can only imagine that places in Las Vegas and Orlando are different.
Sure.
Tim, maybe you know better than I do about what those markets look like right now on the agent side. But for us, we're doing really well.
And Rob, you bring a good point. I think two things fall into place. Number one, Rob, it's having the kind of attitude that you have. You're focused. You're constantly rethinking the game. That's Shad and Melanie. We're always talking. They're like, okay, how do we change our position? And that's the key, is be able to move that. And people think about ocean liner. You got to be able to turn on a dime. And I find that right now, 50% of the agents I talk to, they're like doom and gloom. The world's done. I might as well close my doors. Then the others are like, this is wild, and they're just blowing it up. Now, I belong to a group that actually deals with a lot of folks in the West Coast and in Texas and areas like that. And quite honestly, they are struggling. I mean, in California, there's a huge lack of jumbo financing, that high-end financing. And so there is either a lack of financing, they're requiring higher down payments, or the interest rates just aren't as aggressive as they are here. Unfortunately, our poor folks in the oil industry right now are getting that double whammy. That is one group in Texas and in the Midwest they're getting hit hard as well. And so those two little areas are starting to see some issues. Like I said, Vegas, amazingly, it is a challenging time. But where they are doing well? Colorado, the Mile High State, right? I mean, I asked them how they're doing. They're like, they're blowing it up. It's really crazy. It really is. So Colorado is blowing up. My friends in Oregon are doing really well. Funny thing is, people are moving out of Seattle, moving out of the West Coast, moving into smaller towns. And I think you're going to see an amazing shift from, and you've hit it right on the top, from urban, from cities, right, to country. Because what they've said that in the future, and this has been a massive push, this virus has forced us to telemarket. So what's going to happen? Well, they say 40% of the U.S. population in the next 2 years will be working from home. It'll be a standard. It won't be an option. It'll be the norm. Mm-hmm. Now, think about that. Now, we moved to the city because we wanted to be close to work. We didn't want a 2-hour commute. Now we can have a 2-minute commute. We leave our bedroom, we grab a shower, we grab a sandwich, we turn on the computer, we're working. So a lot of change in that area. And I think we have to, as in the real estate investment community, we need to begin looking at that as well and kind of realize, okay, what's the benefit there? How can I shift my emphasis? Or, how do I shift my commercial property? How do I shift my residential emphasis? How do I go from Airbnb to the short-term rentals? Do I look at long-term rentals? You have a visitor, Chad. If you do that.
It's amazing. She went from one place to the other.
So it is wild. It really is. Oh yeah.
Well, because I wanted to say this is really interesting. I've been talking about this a lot with people, and the thing is that, you know, the quality of life of people was going to change dramatically, because the reason that their life hasn't been so happy is they can't be home when their kids get home. They can't take them to the sports and all that kind of good stuff. Yet at the same time, it opens up an opportunity. And I've even thought deeper and about this is, then you look at businesses that'll have less overhead.
Right.
They'll start having people work from home so that their profitability can soar, yet they're getting more work out of the people that are working in the industry. And then the flip side of that is then what happens with that commercial space, as you were saying, that becomes available, and then what opportunities can happen with that. So we always talk about, with every downfall, there's an opportunity that can happen. And it's just being able to see what the opportunities that can exist, and maybe helping create those opportunities to be ahead of the curve. And that's where we see people thrive in a downward turn.
Right.
And that's what I love about our conversations all the time, is because we're always thinking outside that box and what is the opportunity.
Well, let's toss out some ideas. Tim, what do you think is going to happen? I have some ideas.
From an office standpoint, first of all, I think we're going to go heavy into that temporary office space. You know, that opportunity for, just like having a fully furnished house, to be able to do short-term rentals. The same thing's going to be applying to real estate. So you're going to have a shift of, hey, I normally have 40 offices, now to a shift of, hey, I can have 41 unit offices with that secretarial support group in the middle, and be able to entertain that scenario. Having the ability to, you know, have a, you know, meeting room, meeting space, that kind of thing. But we're not going to have the same needs. It's like teaching classes. I mean, you remember we all require CE classes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yet now all I've been doing in the last 2 weeks is teaching little 1 hour snippets, no longer CE classes, but that's how we're getting the message out. So in commercial, I think we're going to see that huge shift to more of the smaller unit spaces. I'm actually, at this point in time, I've got 4,000 square feet. I'm cutting my space in half. I've already started identifying that. I've identified who can work from home, who can't, because not everybody's going to be able to do it. Same thing with my residential space. You know, I've changed the way I'm looking at residential and what people are looking for. I'm actually looking for, which is kind of funny, I'm looking into clamping. Because
What was that?
Clamping, which is the glamorous glamping, which is the glamorous camping.
Oh, clamping. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which is out here, because people are so involved in farms and involved into, they want to camp in a natural setting, but they want to be into agriculture. So we're looking at diversifying completely different than where I started from just, you know, 3 years ago. So I've already started changing our space and changing our layout from that perspective. So that's been one of my perspectives. What are you saying, Rob? What's your thought process?
You know, what came to mind for me initially, and it'll be interesting to see, you're going to have some of this smaller commercial space, that's office space, some of these buildings that may have to convert over to, you start thinking about what's the highest and best use. We have a shortage of affordable housing where we are in the Reston, Northern Virginia area. I could see where some of those get rezoned, and you start creating some affordable housing solutions, because the office demand is just not going to be there.
Right.
Now, you know, is that going to happen? I don't know, but that came to mind. The other thing is, as Mel was talking, is I do think, you know, there are outskirt towns that people, I think, have wanted to live in, but they just can't because of the commute. And I think people will say, you know what, my employer now allows me to do it, so I'm going to go to, you know, Winchester as an example, or I'm going to go to, and I'll be able to work from there, and I can make city dollars in country living, right? Now, some people are going to be, they're not going to be able to do that. But there's going to be a lot of white collar jobs that can do that, and that'll be an interesting trend to see play out. Right.
What do you think will happen to values, Rob, in the cities? As far as, because that's one of the big questions that everybody's been asking me is, do I think that the expensive condos, the expensive units in the Washington D.C. metropolitan area, for example, will hold their value, given that we might see just the opposite, a run from the city network to, like, for example, to living in Frederick, to living in Fredericksburg, to living in, Culpeper, to Orange County, maybe King George, where the ability to do the telecommuting is more available. And let's face it, I can buy a $400,000 house in King George, which is massive, in this little tiny town, and I can have fun and know everybody, or I can buy a 400 square foot condo in Alexandria, Virginia. What do you see going on along those lines?
I don't know. I think there's some people that are just city dwellers. They're just in their heart. They're like, you know what? I'm going to live in a city. I'm thinking of my daughter, right? She's 18 this month. And I think that young generation is just going to want to live in the city, right? Now, are they going to be able to afford that high-end housing? I don't know. They're not going to be able to afford that high-end housing.
Dad's there, though, right?
What's that? That's right. Dad's there. But I do think that there's going to be in many people's hearts, well, let me move out to a small town. And I think that this has been going on for a long time, right? This just kind of exacerbates some of it. I don't see values. I mean, I think the question was, do we see values going down over time? We're going to be tracking inventory levels closely to see what happens. Right now, inventory levels are still really low. I do anticipate that there will be, unfortunately, a rise in foreclosures and short sales because as all this kind of works through the market. But I have been pleasantly surprised by the resilience of the real estate market during this whole thing. Let me ask you a question, Tim, because when you're pulling credit reports, I saw something the other day that started showing it showed forbearance on their credit report.
Right.
Right. Are you seeing that?
So let's talk about that. Yeah. So if it's showing forbearance, most lenders are showing it as a forbeared loan. They'll show in there due to disaster, natural disaster. Here's the kick. You ready? Not having impact on credit scores, which are phenomenal. But once you have forbeared a loan, it pushes you back 12 months from the first payment before you can get any kind of mortgage or any kind of new debt. Because when you forbear a debt, it says in essence,
hey, I can't pay it.
Hey, my finances are tight. I can't make the payment. So, and then any lender's going to look at you and say, I think we should wait 12 months until you can show you can make those payments again. And that's what's happening in a nutshell. Is it affecting the score? No. Is it affecting their buying ability? Yes. And do I think we'll see short sales? Quite a bit. Foreclosures? Not as much, because they think the government's going to step in and say, forbear the payment, defer the loss, don't put people out on the streets. We don't need more homelessness. We don't need the 1929 Great Depression, but recognizing that we cannot continue to keep you in the house. Now, one of the articles I saw, which I thought was amazing, was the government stepping in to people that can't afford their homes, government loans, buying back the house and renting it to the consumer. Totally different concept. It was a think tank, and they were talking about, okay, what's going to happen if we have 30% unemployment and people own their homes? Do we want to push them out into apartments? Do we want to push them out of their communities? Do we want vacant communities, or could we, in essence, not foreclose but deed in lieu, right? And then turn around and say, look, we're going to deed in lieu. We're going to forgive the $20,000 of unpaid payments. And in return, we're going to allow you to rent back that house. And we're going to give you a 12-month time frame. And at the end of a certain period of time, we may even consider selling the house to you back. But at this point in time, it's better than vacant houses. It's better than, empty communities. It's better than disruptions to children and schooling, et cetera. So I found that to be a very interesting strategy. The foreclosures, I don't think are going to occur as much because we've had severely tight lending practices and guidelines for the last, 5 years at least. If not since 2009, it's been tight as bones. And we did have some loosening up early this year, and then, bang.
I had a friend of mine who he was a really big REO agent during the last downturn. And as soon as he's not in the business, he owns a technology company now that, is in the real estate space. And as soon as it started happening, I called him up and I said, hey, I anticipate we're going to see foreclosures. We're going to see a rise in foreclosures, short sales. This is before I knew how this was all going to work through the system. And And I'm like, who are your contacts? Who do I talk to? Who do I call? Right. And he said, I don't think it's going to work like that.
Nope.
He's like, I think what's going to happen is you're going to see these banks. They don't want the black eye. They don't want the black eye foreclosures again.
Nope.
Right. And so what might happen is that they sell the debt to hedge funds. Right. And so what you'll start seeing is that these hedge funds, they want to buy real estate. They like real estate as an asset class.
Correct.
And they'll go in and they'll buy tapes of large properties, right? Of a lot of property. So I thought that was interesting. It kind of goes to what you're saying, where the bank, where the government will step in and buy that property and then re-rent it again. They're almost like the investor in that case, right?
Well, I mean, let's think about it. We've written $3 trillion in checks already, right? And now today the House is writing another $3 trillion. It's like infinite money. It's where's it all coming from? Now, here's the only scary thing. And I will say one thing that I'm a little hedged about, which is in 1929, after the Great Depression and things kind of got out of hand, what occurred was the tax rates went through the roof.
Yeah. What's going to have to happen?
Again, exactly. Well, I think it will. I think we will see them go up significantly. And that's where I think this topic that we're talking about today is significant, because let's face it, real estate provides you with that one massive tax advantage, right? We take depreciation, we write off expenses, we set up LLCs, we have management companies. I mean, if you want a tax shelter, own real estate. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? Rob, you got to buy a new vehicle to be able to go out to your new houses. And, Shad, you're going to have to go up and rent out, 40% of your house as, residential use of home for your business. I mean, and think about those avenues. So I look at real estate and say to myself, okay, real estate not only is it an investment, right? But it's also a passive income producer. It's a future income, appreciation. And then I look at it as it's a tax saver today. And then I might put it into a trust. I might do a 1031 exchange. I mean, there are massive different avenues for me down the road. So yeah, when we talk about real estate, yeah, so much fun. It's crazy. It really is.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. We look at it for the residential rental. The 4 parts that we look at are, number one, Rob, you're talking about, and Tim, you said it too, the cash flow just really kind of gets reinvested into the property, but being able to take advantage of those tax breaks from depreciation to, and hopefully having somebody pay down your property. And then also, in theory, everything's going to appreciate. One of the things that I've been talking about is we're printing all this money. That's where this $6 trillion is coming from, is straight from the Treasury. We're just printing all this new money. That does is exactly what you're saying is it's going to create inflation. Inflation causes everything to go up in price, including housing. So in that sense, I think what we're going to see as well is we're going to see an increase in what houses cost, property values, because it just comes naturally with everything else. What do you guys think?
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, your can of Coke, let's face it. All right, my house that I bought in 1984 recently resold for $395. I bought it for $74,000. And I'm a cheap bastard. You know that. I mean, well, say like it is, right? I mean, so I look at that and say to myself, if I had been smart and had kept it instead, like Rob, right? Instead, I was constantly doing 1031 exchanges, deferring it out, reinvesting it in different avenues. That's what I ended up doing. But yes, you're right on the money. I mean, so that same house today has gone up 5-fold, right? And it could have paid itself, once over plus just in the rental income alone. But at that point in time, I didn't have the cash flow to be able to build up. And quite frankly, we didn't have the products we have today to be able to jump in and do it. But Shad, you're on the money. Oh yeah.
Shad, the number one regret, because I talk to a lot of investors, and the number one regret that they have is all the properties that they've sold along the way.
Right.
And not figured out a way to keep them. And my wife and I included, right? During 2000, let's see, my wife and I were buying 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004. And what was real estate happening during it? It was just going straight up like this. Right?
Sure.
And I remember telling my wife, this is not sustainable. It's going to crash. And it was only because the only reason I knew that was because we'd gone through a tech recession and I was in tech, right, at the time. And it felt the same way. So I got the bright idea that we should sell everything in like 2004, 2005. And I did. And I thought I was so smart, right? Because I was like, oh my God, like we took all this money and we took the money off the table. We reinvested it and we bought some other stuff, right?
Sure.
And then everything crashed right in 2008. So I'm thinking I'm really smart. And then I realized, wow, I was really dumb because everything came back. And that money that money that we took off the table, like, I'm like, where is it? Like, if we still own those properties, right. That would all be locked in. We'd have another seven assets that are all paid for, right? If we just held on over time. Now, we needed the money at the time. There's all these things. You needed the money. But what I've learned is you could figure out a way to get it. We didn't need the money. That was the easy way to get the money, right? I was like, oh, we need $100,000. Sell the asset, right? We put $150,000 pocket. Now I'm like, don't sell, right? So anyhow, there was a question that was put on here by Lawrence, and it left, and I want to make sure we get it answered. It was regarding a 203K loan.
Yeah, I can answer that real quick. Yeah, so on the Ks, and this is real important, what's happening is because the government is basically buying all the mortgage-backed securities, there's two products that are extremely risky, which are the renovation and rehab loans. And unfortunately, because of the high risk to them and the lack of people buying them, those products have just become really unfinanciable. I mean, the last 203K I looked at as a loan back in the end of March when the market was just going bananas, it was like 5.5% and 4 points. I mean, it's like hard money, right? Now, there are renovation programs out there, by the way. I mean, we have one that's 10% down. And I think the rate's 4.25 today, and it's 0.5 point. But 10% down is a lot of money. Why? Because it's less risk. Now, why is the risk? It's real simple. The investors, the people that manage these 203K products, are concerned that the consultants, the contractors, are not going to be able to get in and do the work. COVID-19, somebody's going to get sick, and the supplies are going to be there. There's going to be some disruption in the process. And the riskiest house you can have is one that's not been renovated. And so, are there products out there? Yes. Are they as flexible as far as the down payment? No. But are there programs? Oh, good Lord, yeah. There are things there. You just got to figure out how do you fit it in, and that's really the critical piece.
That's interesting, Tim, because it is a valid point because we're doing a couple of projects, and one of the things that we've run into is a lack of supply of materials.
Yep.
And so that's what number one, I guess, what contractors are having an issue with, and obviously it's a supply and demand business. So if there's less supply, then there's more demand, then the price goes up. And what we found was where we've done things like for the farmhouse that we renovated, we did we actually bought the vanities in the bathrooms from Costco, which saved us. I mean, it was probably a 40 to 50% savings because they really fit the house. It wasn't because we were necessarily trying to save money, but just instead of having a regular vanity, what's happened is just getting those type of products, like from the Costco's of the world, and even from Lowe's and Home Depot, is a lot harder. That there's a lot of delays.
Waiting
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Just so the prices, the two things are, number one is being able to get the product when you need it, and then also the price of what you're paying for it.
Right.
So it does make sense, and you got to kind of build that as an investor. You got to build that into even if you're using the burn method for a rental property. That 20 to 30,000 that we normally budget is going up a little bit just because we're having to spend more money on the materials.
Well, you're carrying them.
And that too.
Time. 3 more months, right? No time.
Right. Yeah. Yep. No, absolutely. So, I think that's a very valid point, but hopefully they'll loosen up a little bit. I think what we've seen as well is on the commercial side for business, for refinancing rental properties, we saw everything kind of tighten up. There was nothing out there one of the banks that we used, I called them up and said, hey, if I've got these 2 properties, I'm ready to finance. And they're like, we're doing nothing and we don't know when we're going to do anything. And I was like, kind of like how we first started was, Rob, I was the same way as you, as I was like, oh my God, this is happening. This is going to be crazy. And it's the end of the world. It's like everything's falling apart. And then stepping back, and of course, Melanie talked me off my ledge. She's really good at that. But it just, I think where we are now is now we're seeing it kind of loosen up a little bit. But I think you have the same probably situation.
Yeah, it was funny. I called. I'm hearing feedback. Can you hear me? Okay.
You're good.
Okay. I called up our bank, or I'd gotten done doing a residential refi, and I remember it was interesting because it's right when everything was hitting, and I'm driving to sign all the paperwork, and a thought went through my head. It was, should I move forward with this refi, or should I just sell the asset? Because we don't know. I don't know what 7 months down the road looks like. And I had a friend of mine talk me off the ledge. He's like, listen, refi, just go through with a refi. And, you could always sell it 3 months later, 4 months later. I said, oh, well, but I pay the refi cost. He's like, it's just cost of doing business, man. Cost of doing business. That way it just gives you kind of the option. But then I called up my bank and said, hey, I've got this 7-unit building and I want to refi it right now and they were like, he practically laughed at me. Right. He was like, we're not doing it. But then I told them that it was all government subsidized. And then the tone changed. Right. I was like, listen, all of them are Section 8 tenants. All of them. And he's like, oh, okay, well, then that's a different story. But up until that point, I mean, now if I had that conversation with him today, I'm sure it would be different. This was in the middle of it. Right. A month and a half ago, they're like, the sky's falling. Right.
Right. No, it was definitely, it was concerning to me because first I was like, okay, well, here's the situation. They're like, well, sorry, don't know what to tell you. Not going to happen. And he also told me, and by the way, I'm retiring in 2 months. I was like, oh crap. Now the relationship is like, where do I go from here? What do I do? I spent all this time, working on this. And luckily, he stayed on long enough to make things move over and take care of things. But it was like there was definitely a panic, and it felt like, what's happening? Is everybody getting out of the business? Is this this guy's got 40 years experience in this? Does he know something I don't know?
He's like, I'm done.
Right. I'm selling it all. So yeah, it was a little bit concerning, but I think we're moving forward, and I think definitely is the market feels a little more comforting. I think everybody had this panic of what we went through in the real estate crash, and I think at our last meeting, really one of the things that was said was this isn't a real estate problem. This is more of a liquidity problem that we're having right now, as people are pulling their money out of the market. And if we can get through and get people to feel more comfortable with it, I think it's gonna change the way that everybody feels about the whole thing. And it seems that it's leveling off is my feel.
100%.
Right. So I guess the next thing I had for a question is are you guys looking, and are you hearing from your investors that in I guess single family residential is everybody that you're dealing with still looking to buy? That's a big question that I've been hearing.
Yeah, I put a property up today just in our group, 499, exit 725, and our phone is just blowing up. Right. What happens is there's been a lot of people waiting on the sidelines that have cash, and they're not afraid, and they're ready to go. There's some investors that are being cautious. So it's like anything, right? You've got some that are being cautious, and then you have some that are just they're flush with cash and they want to buy, right? And I think, Shad, the sentiment is, okay, the sky isn't falling. I mean, there was a period of time there where we're like, holy smokes, what does this mean, right? And then people applied for the PPP, and PPP started coming through. Some people didn't get them, some people got them. We noticed that real estate was still moving, things were still selling. And this is our world, right? Restaurants, retail. I mean, imagine like the chaos that those guys are in, right? Like
Right.
our section here, real estate. It's like, okay, wow, people are still operating. People are still wanting to go view homes, and they're cool with Zoom, Zooming of the home. They're cool going in with a mask and with the gloves. They're still interested. They like, I was shocked, and I'm like, great, let's do it. Let's keep going. And so I feel like this, that initial shock is over, and now people are just, they're ready. They're continuing the move, and investors are continuing to buy. Now, are hard money lenders cautious? Yes. Are people more cautious? Yes. Are people now analyzing deals differently? Yes. And yet life goes on and people are still doing deals, right?
Sure.
No.
And I think it was too also it was kind of a slap in the face, and everybody said, hey, maybe we shouldn't be lending at these valuations or lending at, with this little amount in, from the buyer, just they need more skin in the game. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing, I think. What are you seeing, Tim, on the investor side with that?
Well, I mean, honestly, I'm seeing people take their money out of the stock market and investing it into real estate itself. I mean, they had a good run. A lot of people started pulling their money out early as it was declining. And now they're telling me, hey, I've got a couple $100,000. Where do I invest it? How do I apply it? And I think you're right on the money, guys. I mean, people are realizing I've got cash. I like to put it in something that's tangible, not some paper, creative item that is not real in their eyes. They're looking around saying, what's the best investment? And real estate really is the key. It really comes down to the value and the return on the money. So we're seeing people jumping in. We expect a massive amount and infusion, if you will, of houses coming to the market starting in June and into July, August, September. And they're going to be first of all, the folks that are, trapped in their homes right now that are finally ready to get out. 900 square feet is too small for 2 kids and 2 parents, right? We're going to see a lot of our landlords saying, hey, you know what? The tenants didn't pay. And I didn't really have the money to cover that shortfall. And I didn't realize there was risk. I thought people will pay me forever. And they're going to step out of the marketplace. And then, unfortunately, you're going to have a lot of elderly, some may have passed. And some of them may have realized, you know what? I'm too far from Rob. Where is he? And they're going to want to move closer to their kids. They're going to want to move closer to their hospitals, to their doctors, to their support networks. Mm-hmm. So we see those 3 avenues, coming on board. And we think there's going to be a very strong rush of real estate come in the marketplace. And that's that investor sector that we really want to attack and destroy. So I've prepped all of my clients. I've told them, look, get their finances in order. Look at their tax returns. If you haven't filed them, let's file them. Let's be prepared. And let's be able to take advantage. And of course, Melanie brings out too, what about divorce, right? Yeah, I literally have a client right now that I'm refinancing because of that situation. The husband and wife, and the wife calling me on one side crying and the husband saying, I can't say I live with her on the other. So I said, can you sell? And we looked at it and unfortunately, there's not enough equity to sell. So refinancing one partner out. The same principle applies. So I think we'll see that as well. So I think those 4 avenues will really hit it hard.
Yeah, it's an opportunity, Shad. One that I keep saying that we need to target effectively, and we haven't done it, is going after that absentee owner list hard. There's a lot of accidental landlords that are out there that want to take money off the table. Their tenants aren't paying and they freak out because of it. So I believe that is a source of product for us either to list or to purchase. And you need to have an effective strategy to go after that.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's one of the things that I'm seeing is I thought everybody was going to pull back and not purchase, and especially on the investor side. And what we saw was honestly almost the opposite, total opposite.
Right.
And it was funny when I was talking to Dwayne. He said it's okay to be cautious, but don't mistake caution for wisdom. Like if you just sit back and you say, okay, kind of like where you thought you had the right answer by selling everything it isn't necessarily the right answer. Yeah, you want to be cautious and you want to make sure that your numbers work for sure, especially now. But just because you say don't do anything doesn't make you money. One of the things that he brought up as an economist was, he said, all these banks pulled their money back, which was fine, but they have investors that put that money to them to make them money. So those investors are like, okay, well, I parked my money with you, and yeah, you made it safe, but when am I going to start making money? So they're going to start reinvesting in putting loans out and things like that. So I think the market will continue to loosen up a little bit, and I think will all start to shake out, and everybody will kind of feels like today the governor in Maryland said we can start phase 1. So I think it feels like people are starting to feel more normal now.
Yeah.
So.
What is phase 1 for you guys?
So phase 1 is that we are seeing the ability they open up the parks, they opened up golf courses, and they opened up boating last week. And then this week, what they're doing is they're opening up a lot of, they're allowing the restaurants to start to allow patrons into the restaurants in a limited basis. Just some things like that, opening up retail, but just controlling it. But I guess they're saying 50% capacity is where he's looking at leaving that number at this point in time. So and it seems like, from what I see and what I hear from just talking to people, is there are still people that don't feel comfortable, but there are a ton of people that are just ready to get out and do something, whether it's shop, spend money, all these things, because I think we did the same thing. We cut costs. I mean, Tim, we took your lead and we got rid of our regular TV. So we don't have TV right now. When you look at it, granted, it's, we watch TV maybe an hour a day. And in that sense, like we looking at it, we were like, is this an expense we really need? It's $180 a month. And not that I want to kill Comcast or anybody, but it really, in the whole grand scheme of things, it was, we cut it out, and honestly, it has a minimal effect on the house. So my son may disagree, but say for us, it pretty much feels like normal.
Very cool.
So I guess I don't know how many people we have on. I don't have the ability to do that, but
you should be able to see. No.
Well, Melanie's the host, so she's in the other room.
She's got the host.
Right, but I wanted to put out there too. I guess so. What we said was people are still buying. People are, the loans are starting to come back. To, I guess Rob, start out. What do you, the next 6 to 12 months? What's your plan for your real estate investment business?
It is going after absentee landlords, because I know that is going to help 2 ways. One, it'll get us more listings, and it'll give me more opportunity on the purchase side. So definitely doubling down on that. Keeping my eyes open for opportunity. One of the things I wanted to do was I literally started making phone calls to investors that I know that have a lot of cash, and I just said, listen, there's going to be a time I'm going to come knock on your door. I'm going to tell you, hey, there's an opportunity for us. I'm like, the time's not right now, but just within the next year and a half, just expect that call, right? And they all kind of laugh, and I'm like, I think we're going to see some opportunity. And I just wanted to start preparing people with those conversations now, because I want to syndicate some deals, and I know that I could pull a lot of people together very quickly, right, in order to do it. I'm going to keep my eyes open for some commercial redevelopment opportunities. I don't know what that looks like right now, but I'm just going to be tracking some of these commercial properties and keeping my eyes open and talking to commercial real estate agents to understand what's happening in their world. And And I know that in our area where I am, there's just still a huge need for rental properties. And if I have tenants calling me all the time, or people that have been referred by tenants that say, hey, we know that you own property. Do you have anything available? And I'm like, I don't. And it just goes to show you there's a massive demand. And I'd love to be able to buy something to help fill that demand, right? So I'll keep my eyes open there, and then doing a lot of this, like talking to investors and figuring out what people are doing in other markets. What I'm hearing across the country, for the most part, is that real estate is moving forward better than most. And that's a good thing for us. Not as many properties hit the market, but not as many buyers were on the market. But so it stabilized prices. So prices kind of stabilized, and we saw, still multiple offers on properties. So it's still a seller's market. But at some point, I have to imagine that it's going to start becoming more balanced or more of a buyer's market. I don't know when. I mean, think about it, Shad. How long has it been a seller's market?
A long time, and it's interesting because we were like I was talking to somebody, another agent, and really what we're seeing is again, it's supply and demand. So there was a ton of demand and very limited supply, and what's happened is both of them have gone down. So there's less stuff on the market, but the people that are buying are serious buyers. They have to buy. So they're still on the market, and there's even less inventory. So you're watching the inventory go down, but you're also seeing the sales go down. And so you're seeing the prices still stay stable. And what we expect is a lot of the government agencies are going to be moving in the next month or so. Like the big thing that with them is that they're not doing any transferring of departments or anything like that. And as that starts to change, what's going to happen is that's going to create actually less inventory, because those people are going to jump in and have to move. And what happens, as you know, on the listing side, is it usually takes a couple of weeks to get that listing up and running, ready, cleaned out, decluttered, all that type of stuff. So I think there's going to be a period where that kind of changes.
Something that comes to mind, and I could be wrong here, but I don't think I am. The iBuyer market went away for a short time because there was like that panic. Well, where's this going? We're not going to buy anymore. Redfin stopped it. Zillow stopped it. But I think as they start seeing that, hey, things are fine, that is going to start happening again. And people are going to want that option. People are going to want the option of, listen, I don't want people coming through my home. There's going to be a segment of the population that's just concerned about that. Just make me an offer, right? And let me be on my merry way. They're going to want an easy solution. So as investors, you can develop your own iBuyer program, your own program. It's like that might resonate with those people. Hey, don't want people coming through your house. Don't want to put it on the open market. Want a fair, fast settlement, right? Call me. I buy property locally in your area. I could see that. There's people that have high anxiety around germs and disease, and they're like, I don't want anybody in my house. And you could develop marketing messages specifically, there if you wanted to. So that might come back. They stopped there for a second, but I think they're probably going to enter back in.
Yeah, I think they will, and I think that the technology itself is going to change and become more advanced to be able to handle those things. Mm-hmm. Like Melanie just sold a house for the second time, just through video. She just people called her from Washington State and said, I need to move, and I don't have the ability to go there. I got to buy. So and how do you do that? And just whatever you want to call it, those video services, ability to show the house, show the floor plan, show the room sizes, all those things that you don't necessarily get right now. There's going to be a big influx, I think, in the market in that technology, and that lends it to the iBuyer. I think that you're absolutely right, Rob. I think it'll have it'll have a big impact in the next year.
It'll be interesting to see how virtual technology might, or like the virtual experience, like the immersion virtual experience, like the Ocular, whether or not this expedites some of that technology. So we'll see.
Right. No, absolutely. And Tim, what do you think of the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, I mean, I'm doing three things. I'm rebalancing my portfolio. I'm actually liquidating some of my larger homes, my larger real estate, because I'm freeing up cash. I'm positioning myself so that in 12, I think it's going to be honestly closer to 12 to 18 months. I think the opportunities are going to be there. I think there's going to be some cash opportunities and you know me, maybe some hard money opportunities too. I mean, you know, it's nice to make 12 to 15%, a couple points. You know, I'm just a small town country boy just trying to make a living. So I look at it from that perspective. So I think that money is going to be available along those lines, number one. And then on the other side of the coin, you know, I'm also looking at it from the perspective of there is some, you know, stock opportunities to get into. I mean, stocks that you're like, wow, how far do they drop? And this was a very well-run company. And when it does come back, you know, it's going to be a tiger by the tail. Let's catch it now. Let's get on board. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at freeing up some cash from the cash flow standpoint. And then I am looking at changing my actual model itself. I look at the mortgage world. Mortgage world changed. I mean, everybody now it's internet driven, and I find the majority of lenders, you know, it's a price throat cutting. You know, how can I get the lowest price possible viewpoint, which is great for your vanilla buyers. I'm not going after vanilla. I want to get chocolate, a little syrup, you know, a little whipped cream. What are the issues that I have to deal with? And that's where I'm pouring my money into that, you know, avenue, that marketing piece, because that's where the business is, because there's very few lenders that have the expertise, the knowledge, or know how to bring the pieces of the pie together, if you will. So that's my focus. Like I said, I'm also going to recreate my entire office. I'm going to change the whole format, make it an open concept. You know, we don't need the lenders don't need offices anymore. They're all accustomed to working from home. The staffing change. There's going to be some staffing adjustments, some portfolio adjustments that way as well. So I'm fascinated by the change. You know, I've been through this. This is my 5th financial challenge in my lifetime, which is kind of wild. You know, the 89, 96, the savings and loan crisis, you know, back in the 80s. You know, that was a crazy time. We got over it. We get through it. And then more opportunity, like Rob said, came available, right? So we look at all the different, every time there is a challenge, there's an opportunity. And what did Baron von Rothschild say when there's blood on the streets? Yeah, buy. So guess what? We have a lot of blood in the streets. I plan to be buying. So that's where
So
I'm
it was
at.
interesting. I was in Gary Keller's mastermind, one of his masterminds. And he's pretty much doing exactly what you're doing, Tim. He said, what I'm doing is he is liquidating some assets that have kind of reached what he feels peak value is. And he's like, even if I sell it at 90 cents on the dollar, I think he's like, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just that every dollar is going to be an additional $3. I'm going to reinvest it in a different market. And so he's going to cash and waiting, right, for 12 to 18 months from now on some of those assets. And you know, here's the thing. I would have tended to agree a month ago. I don't know if I feel the same way today. Right? I don't know if I feel the same way, just because I just see this resilience of the market right now moving through. But with 30% unemployment, I mean there just has to be, like, it just has to be, right? And with what is it? I think 6% of all of loans or 7% of all loans in forbearance, it just has to be opportunity. So just because our area is so damn strong. It's like, so I'm in this weird little bubble of kind of like our bread and butter, you know, 450 to 900,000 in our area. It's like just moving. But other markets, you know, we'd have to explore some other markets. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things I got from talking to Dwayne this afternoon was he's like, you know, I said, where do you invest? And he said, Where do I not invest? I go places. He was in the military, so he knows several different areas. He lives in Memphis, Tennessee, so he does invest there, but he does Georgia, he does Florida, and he said I find a market that seems like it has a need, and what he's looking for are duplexes, quads, that type of stuff. 2 to 4 units. And he.
Can we talk about that real fast?
Yeah, absolutely.
It was really interesting to see how 2 to 4 units under the CARES Act lent itself to like tremendous, especially these government-backed loans, just like almost like an advantage over everything else out there, right? As soon as it turned to commercial paper, like the way you were treated was drastically different, right? The forbearance rules, all that stuff went away. And so I've got a friend out in California that owns a ton of property, and his whole thing is like 2 to 4 units, 2 to 4 units. He just wants to stay in that market. And, and now when you start thinking, okay, well, yeah, I want to scale to 40 units, 100 units, you start assessing risk, and you're like, okay, well, do I want to take on that additional risk? Because if something like this happens again, which it will, right? Those, although I will say the commercial banks have been, Tim, what's been your experience on this? I've talked to a lot of my commercial bankers right now, and they're like, we're working with people. We're delaying pay. Like, even though the CARES Act specifically only gave like a 30-day forbearance versus like 180 days for residential, the commercial banks are like, we're working with people, right?
And we found the same thing. I mean, the banks, they don't want to take on a defaulting asset. So you got to understand it drives and impacts their overall quality, their capital requirements, the whole 9 yards. They'd rather post a payment in the back end and accommodate clients. They are looking at situations though, and they're looking at the type of business you're in, the situation. But we will see some commercial business go under. I think retail is going to suffer dramatically. I think we will see a lot of restaurants go out of business, that, some of the bigger chains. I think there is going to be a lot of reevaluation. But I think from the commercial standpoint, Rob, you're right on the money. I mean, the banks want to try to accommodate it, at least to the point of having some kind of a workout without having a complete default, because it changes their whole bottom line, their balance sheet, which in turn affects their ability to borrow from the feds as well. So I think that's definitely going to be the case.
Yeah, I think on the business side, and talking to both investors that have businesses and also just the business realm, the commercial side is what everything that I've seen is the bigger banks did very little with the PPP and very little to work with anyone, and the community banks are really the ones that made it happen. And those that had the contacts in those banks, that had relationships, really played a part in where you sat on the ability to get funding, to get loans, all that type of stuff. I think, Rob, you even went through that yourself.
I did. I mean, M&T Bank was great, and it all came down to the relationship that I had with my relationship manager.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. We'll have to get back together a year from now and see how all this is played out, right?
Hopefully we're all right, because it seems like we all think the same way.
But for those that are on here that are trying to figure out how to navigate through this, one of the key things that I would tell anybody is pay attention to inventory levels, right? Inventory levels are going to tell you a lot about what's happening.
Right.
And you see those inventory levels in markets start rising, then you know that there's going to be more opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And then look at the buyer demand, right? If we start seeing rising interest rates, which I don't see happening, just like Tim said, right? Those are going to be down for some time. But if you so buyer demand is going to be there. Interest rates are low. Buyer demand is going to be there. And so if you start seeing those inventory levels rise, that's the only thing that I could see like it really affect. I mean, think about this, Tim. Okay. We've had 30% unemployment. I mean, the inventory levels in most markets here in the DMV are a month at best. Okay.
Right.
What does it take to get to a balanced market? Like, what do they typically see? I mean, one's like, 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, 1 to 3 months is a seller's market. 4 to 6 is a more balanced market, and 7 to 9 is a buyer's market. But Robbie, you pointed something out really important, which is that 30% bracket of people that are going to be unemployed. Unfortunately, they're probably not the primary buying stock anyway.
That's right.
I mean, when I'm dealing with clients, I'm not dealing with a client who is a server at Wendy's, a Wendy's person and a server at another institution. They're not my primary buyers. It's in my particular cases, it's the guy that's working for DOD or the government. And we are definitely blessed. There's no question about it. We are in a great marketplace, but we're dealing with people that are middle incomes, and a majority of those, knock on wood, have really not been affected. So, Rob, I agree with you. I don't think we're going to see as significant an impact, but I think where we're going to hit it, which is what Shad said, was inflation and taxes. Those are the two little pieces of the pie. And I think, again, we can all come back where how do we shelter ourselves? And I think real estate is really the bread and butter of it, and the government wants us to do it. So take advantage of it, right? Take advantage of the programs that are out there.
But I guess my point is on it is that then I don't see I don't see as much opportunity as I thought I would see a month ago. Like a month ago, I was like, oh shit, this is just going to go to hell in a handbasket. And like, I got to conserve all the cash that I have because I don't know how bad this is going to be, how deep this is going to be.
Right.
And I may even sell one or two of my assets to go to cash so that I can A, survive this thing, then B, see if there's opportunity on the back end of this. I don't see that in this market as much because inventory levels are so low, right? So imagine 3 months, 4 months. I mean, if I start seeing 3 months and 4 months, then I'm like, okay, it's buying time for us, right?
Right.
But at 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, it's still super competitive,
Good market.
right?
Yeah.
So Shad's still going to try to buy. I'm still going to try to buy it. Him and I are going to compete. That's going to keep values up, right? And so it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. That's why I think that this is really going to be a tale of markets, right?
Yeah, exactly right. That's the key right there. It's the market itself. DMV fairly well insulated, but now let's go to Texas, where it's so dependent upon oil, or Houston, or the Midwest, Arizona, areas that unfortunately won't have the same benefit, if you will.
Yeah.
Someone told me the other day, they said there's going to be a massive opportunity in Florida, in Arizona. And I said, why? They said, well, we're going to see a big change in the senior sector and how that's going to shift. And I was like, wow, I never really thought about that. Then they talked about, how real estate's going to change in New York City. And I think we started with that in the very beginning, all the, $1 million, $2 million, $5 million condos that are kind of really going to just, close down, and the need for secondary housing. So it's going to be a wild shift. It's going to be a wild ride. I mean, it's a wild opportunity.
Actually, it was super interesting. And Melody has a question here. Before we get to that question, though, I mean, but look at real estate in New York City. We haven't talked about that.
No.
I mean, that luxury market whacked.
Exactly.
I mean, it crushed, right? So fascinating. Okay, Melody says, this is for you, Tim. When you say inflation and taxes are what we have to look forward to increasing, do you mean federal income tax or another tax, property tax, etc.?
Federal income taxes. I mean, the feds are printing money like it's going out of style. You got to pay it back. So the feds are going to jack up the federal income tax rate, number one. Property taxes, are they going to go up? Unfortunately, yes, simultaneously, because now, your social network, right, your social web to support all the people that unfortunately are unemployed are going to have to be supported. So so property tax is going to go up along those lines. And then from an inflation standpoint, Shad pointed out earlier, unfortunately, when you start to borrow money and lend it and taxes go up, typically inflation follows. I mean, look at the price of hamburger. I mean, I don't know if you guys priced it, but a pound of hamburger just 2 months ago, $2 a pound. Whatever you're looking at today, it could be $5-6 a pound. So there's going to be a lot of driving force. The only benefit is going to be you can really gas up your car for cheap. That's going to be the only benefit. So so definitely some challenges.
Right. Just don't go anywhere.
No.
I wonder what will happen with, right now, so something that came to mind for me was if an investor wants to sell their asset right now, and they've had it long-term and they're going to realize long-term capital gains. I mean, they're the lowest they've been
Correct.
ever, right? And that number is only going to go up. It's not going to go down. Right. And so so there's an argument, right? Tim, you're going to liquidate something now because you're going to pay less in taxes today, right? Then you're going to pay possibly 5 years from now. And that all depends on, where you might be in the life cycle, where you are in business, right?
Sure. And that's
where you're in life.
Like looking at that in tax wise is the low hanging fruit of what they can tax is going to absolutely capital gains is probably that's a good point. It's easy. It's really easy to say, hey, no, but people are in trouble, so the people that have money need to be taxed more. So interesting. Definitely. What I guess one thing I guess we really hit on was, I guess in the next 6 to 12 months, people are, you guys are looking to kind of increase your cash and look for a couple opportunities here and there, but it's not the end of the world is really what I guess the bottom line of this conversation would be for everybody.
But I need more.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I'm showing more gray here, so I gotta keep looking young. Rob, you look like you got a haircut. You taking care of that at home?
No, man, this thing is out of control. This thing is crazy. My wife, it's funny because my wife likes my long hair, and but look at these sideburns are out of control.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm just gonna keep growing it long. I'm gonna go back old school.
We're retro. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I'm gonna go old school and just keep growing it. It's interesting. There's going to be a big wealth transfer, but it's going to come differently, right? It's going to be with how the conversation first started, where how are we going to change something? How are we going to retrofit something? How are we going to adapt to what's happening? How are we going to what's the new need going to be, right? It'll be less about like, yes, we're going to have assets that people can buy out there, but it's more about repositioning of assets.
Right.
I think that's where a lot of it's looking at things differently. The discovery that you guys had, Shad, I think is really interesting to look at and ponder. I was like, oh, wow, that Airbnb market's going to get crushed. And then I got that email for the traveling nurses asking about, short-term housing. I forwarded to you straight away. And it was like, that's interesting. There's a need for that, right? Yeah. Whether you're a corporation, whether, you're dealing with a pandemic and now you got to bring in nurses and doctors into a specific area and they need short-term housing. So new models are going to develop out of this, right? For sure. And Tim, like you, we've cut our office, but I don't think I'm going to go back to all the space that we have. Right.
Yeah, that was funny. We were in the process, and I think Tim, you knew about this. Was we were looking at getting actual office space because we thought that might be the way to go, and we were in the market for looking for things, and then this happened, and we were like, man, absolutely not. We're back into working out of our home office and doing that.
Taking advantage of business use of home.
Right.
I was looking to buy a building.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, I am so glad I didn't. I'm so glad I did. I was
right.
Like,
so
guys, I gotta roll.
Okay.
I gotta roll too.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. I really appreciate your time, Rob. Thank you, Tim. We're going to break this off and I'll stay on for a couple minutes. If anybody wants to ask any questions or anything, I'll stay on for a few and then we'll go from there.
Awesome. Thanks,
Tim,
guys.
nice to meeting you.
Rob, always pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Rob.
Hey, Shad. Thanks so much, man. Good conversation.
Absolutely.
But I think to put a cherry on it, you're right. I think we've moved through this initial panic. Buyers and sellers are out there active. There is opportunity, but it's not going to come in the way that we think. We have to think strategically, and it'll be interesting. So it'll be great to re-explore this again right? But one thing that I think a lot of business owners did do, I know I did, it sounds like you guys did, was get very real on what you're spending. Get very real on what you're spending. Like I went in there and said, okay, to the dollar, what is our household expense? And we're always good with the business because we're a profit sharing business, and so I have to be good at that with all my teammates and everything. But then do we need this expense? Do we really need this? Right? And then in the house, we were a little bit more like, I think our household spend is around. And I'm like, no, there's no around. It's like get very, very specific on what that is. And if you have, and by the way, that's just a good thing for everybody to always do, right? But we hadn't done it, and I guarantee you a lot of people haven't done it. And so I'd encourage you to do it. That's the only way to really build wealth, guys, by the way, is to, nail that number and then nail your business number. And
so Gary says, control expenses,
control the expense. I was telling my wife today, I mean, I feel I look at how much money our investments over time, right? This has happened over time, that they just build their net worth, right? Like, more than 50% of my mortgage payment now is just money I'm paying myself, essentially, right, on my personal mortgage. And it's like that for all of our investment properties as well. And so I'm like, okay, we need to do more of that, right?
Right.
I mean, one critical mistake I made, Shad, was I didn't buy more when the number still made sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't make that mistake again, right? I remember thinking, why would I buy it for 160 when I bought it for 120 last year? Well, the number still made sense, but I was, I stopped, and I should have kept buying. I think I could have bought, a whole bunch more property. Yeah, and so I do hope that we find additional opportunities like that to do. But I don't know. I don't feel like, how do you feel compared 1 month ago? What did you, where was your brain a month ago and where is it today? It's a different place, right?
Totally. And it's funny because it was 2.5 months ago, we were at a place, and then a month after that, we were at a completely different place. And then now a month after that, we're at a completely different place again. So it's like, what's going to happen in a month from now?
Well, that'd
be interesting.
It could be scary or it could be positive. So that's why I'm a big fan of just like Tim. It sounds like Tim's doing this. Keep expenses low.
Yep.
Pay it off. Be secure. Be strong. Right. And keep your eye open for opportunity. Okay, man. Right. I'm off.
All right.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. All right. Bye. All right. So I'll hang out for a couple minutes. If you guys have any questions or anything, just pop them in. If not, I'll drop off in just a minute or two here. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. And, we're working on next month's meeting. If you guys have ideas on what you want us to talk about, definitely let me know, and we'll line up some people to talk, different speakers. We're breaking things out of just being in the local market as well. So we want to expand our reach. So. All right. Well, I don't really see anybody else coming on, so I'm going to go ahead and close this down, and everybody stay safe and have a good night. I'll talk to you soon.